before Spotify, before Apple Music, before streaming anything at all, there was a period when the internet felt like the frontier. And if you wanted music or movies or software, you didn't buy it. You didn't subscribe to it, you shared it. This is the story of an era that lasted maybe 6 years, but changed everything forever. June 1st, 1999. A 19-year-old college student named Sean Fanning releases a program he'd been coding in his dorm room at Northeastern University. He calls it Napster. Within months, it has 20 million users. By the end of 2000, that number has grown to over 80 million registered accounts. Napster did something that sounds completely mundane now, but was revolutionary then. It let you search for MP3 files sitting on someone else's computer and download them directly. That's it. But that simple idea broke open the entire music industry. The way it worked was elegant in its simplicity. Napster used a centralized server to index every song that every user was sharing. You'd type in Radiohead OK Computer, and the server would tell you which users had that file. Then you'd connect to their computer and download it. Peer-to-peer, no middleman, no record store, no $20 CD. College campuses were the epicenter. Students had something most people didn't have in 1999: high-speed internet connections. Dorm networks started clogging with traffic. Some universities reported that up to 61% of their external network bandwidth was just Napster. Schools started banning it not because of copyright concerns, but because their infrastructure couldn't handle it. The experience of using Napster was unlike anything that had come before. You could find bootlegs, unreleased tracks, live recordings, B-sides from albums that never made it to the United States, songs that had been out of print for decades. The catalog was whatever 80 million people happened to own, which turned out to be almost everything. But Napster had a fatal flaw built into its design. That centralized server, the same system that made searching so fast and efficient, also made Napster a single, very visible target. The Recording Industry Association of America filed a lawsuit on December 6th, 1999, just 6 months after Napster launched. Metallica followed in April 2000 after discovering an unreleased version of their song I Disappear circulating on the platform. Drummer Lars Ulrich testified before Congress, calling Napster theft. He became the face of the anti-piracy movement, and the internet hated him for it. On March 5th, 2001, a federal court issued an injunction. Napster had to block copyrighted music. The company tried to comply, developing filters that they claimed blocked 99.4% of infringing files. The court said that wasn't good enough. In July 2001, Napster shut down its entire network. By June 2002, the company filed for bankruptcy. Napster was dead. File sharing was not. The lesson everyone learned from Napster's collapse was simple: centralization kills. If you wanted to build a file sharing network that couldn't be shut down, you couldn't have a central server. You needed to be truly decentralized. Dozens of developers raced to build exactly that. March 2001. A Dutch company called Consumer Empowerment launches Kazaa. It runs on something called the Fast Track protocol, and it's built completely differently than Napster. Instead of one central server, Fast Track uses what are called supernodes. These are just regular users with fast connections who volunteer their computers to help coordinate searches. If one supernode goes down, another takes its place. Cut off the head, and the network keeps running. Kazaa was faster than Napster, it was more resilient than Napster, and it wasn't just music. Users shared videos, software, games, entire DVD images. Anything you could turn into a file, Kazaa could move it. At its peak, Kazaa had over 4 million simultaneous users and had been downloaded an estimated 239 million times. By 2003, the Fast Track network was the most popular file sharing system in the world, with approximately 2.4 million people online at any given moment. That was more concurrent users than Napster ever had. But Kazaa came with a price. Literally. The free version bundled spyware and adware into the installer, programs that tracked your browsing habits, pop-up ads that couldn't be closed. Your computer would slow down and you'd have no idea why until you dug through your system and found the hidden processes Kazaa had installed. Then there were the fake files. Kazaa's network was flooded with them. You'd search for a popular song and get 50 results. Half of them were mislabeled. A quarter were corrupted. Some were files intentionally poisoned by the RIAA to punish people for downloading. You'd wait 30 minutes for a song to finish, only to discover it was actually a clip of someone yelling at you for pirating music. Kazaa Lite became popular for exactly this reason. It was a modified version of Kazaa with all the spyware stripped out. By mid 2005, it was almost as widely used as the official client. The network didn't care which version you used. Everyone connected to the same fast track pool. Lawsuits started piling up fast. The RIAA sued Kazaa in October 2001. The company moved its operations offshore to Australia and was incorporated in Vanuatu, a small island nation in the South Pacific. It didn't help. In September 2005, an Australian court ruled that Kazaa had knowingly authorized copyright infringement. The company agreed to pay $100 million in settlements. Kazaa lingered as a legal subscription service for a while, but by 2012 it was completely gone. May 2000, a program called LimeWire launches. Built on something called the Gnutella network, it's even more decentralized than Kazaa. There are no supernodes, no central coordination at all. Every user is equal. Every computer in the network talks to every other computer to find files. LimeWire became the default choice for millions of people who just wanted something simple. The interface was clean, the program was free, and unlike Kazaa, it didn't come loaded with malware. But simplicity had a cost. Gnutella was inefficient. Searches were slow because your request had to flood through the entire network until someone responded. Downloads frequently stalled. You'd get halfway through a file, and the person sharing it would go offline and you'd have to start over, and the files themselves, a minefield. LimeWire had the same problems Kazaa did, but worse. Fake files, mislabeled songs, viruses disguised as popular downloads. Every teenager who used LimeWire has a story about accidentally downloading something that destroyed their computer or their parents' computer. Britney Spears' toxic.mp3 would turn out to be a 40-second porn clip, or a virus, or someone screaming. The unreliability was part of the experience. You learned to look for files with high-quality ratings. You learned to check the file size. You learned not to trust anything. By 2007, LimeWire was installed on more than a third of all personal computers globally. A survey from 2009 found that 58% of people who downloaded music from peer-to-peer networks used LimeWire. It was ubiquitous. Then, in October 2010, the hammer fell. U.S. District Court Judge Kimba Wood issued an injunction shutting down LimeWire entirely. The Recording Industry Association of America initially claimed LimeWire was responsible for $72 trillion in damages. $72 trillion, more than the entire global GDP. Eventually, they settled for $105 million. The shutdown didn't work the way the RIAA hoped. LimeWire was open source software, which meant anyone could modify it. Within days, someone released LimeWire Pirate Edition, which removed the shutdown code and all the advertising. It spread across the internet in hours. Other forks like FrostWire and Wireshare kept the Gnutella network alive for years. But there was one more network, quieter than the others, slower, less flashy, but for people who needed to download really big files, it was the only option that mattered. The year 2000, two developers, Jed McCaleb and Sam Yagan, released something called eDonkey 2000. The name sounds like a joke, but the technology behind it was serious. eDonkey ran on the ED2K network, and it was designed specifically for large files, full movies, complete software packages, disk images that were hundreds of megabytes or even gigabytes. The reason it worked so well for big files was a feature called swarming. You could download different pieces of the same file from multiple people at the same time. If one person went offline, your download didn't stop. It just kept pulling chunks from everyone else. And if your connection dropped, you could resume exactly where you left off. Even days later, even weeks later. This was transformative for people who wanted things Napster and Kazaa couldn't handle. Hollywood movies, entire operating systems, Adobe Creative Suite, games that came on multiple CDs, the kind of files that took hours or even days to download on early 2000s internet connections. eDonkey wasn't as fast as Kazaa for small files. It wasn't as user-friendly as LimeWire. But for serious users, people who knew what they were doing and had patience, it was unmatched. The most popular client for the eDonkey network wasn't even the original eDonkey 2000 program. It was an open source alternative called eMule. By 2002, eMule had overtaken the official client. By 2005, it represented over 90% of all activity on the ED2K network. Emule was faster, more reliable, and didn't have any of the commercial baggage. In September 2005, the RIAA sent MetaMachine, the company behind eDonkey 2000, a cease and desist letter. The company agreed to pay $30 million and shut down the official client, but the network didn't die. Emule kept running. The ED2K protocol was open. No one owned it. You couldn't kill it by suing one company. eDonkey introduced ideas that would become standard in file sharing: multi-source downloading, resume capability, file hashing to verify integrity. These concepts laid the groundwork for BitTorrent, which would eventually eclipse everything that came before it. Here's what all of these platforms had in common: they were chaotic, unreliable, dangerous even. You never knew if the file you were downloading was real. You never knew if it would finish. You never knew if it contained a virus that would brick your computer. But they also felt like freedom. The music industry in the late 90s and early 2000s was controlled by a handful of massive corporations. CDs cost $15 to $20. Albums were filled with filler tracks because you couldn't buy just the one song you wanted. Radio stations played the same 30 songs on loop. MTV had stopped playing music videos. File sharing broke that model completely. Suddenly, you could listen to anything, discover obscure bands from other countries, track down that one song you heard once at a party, build a music library that would have cost thousands of dollars for free. The arguments against it were obvious. Artists weren't getting paid. Record labels were losing money. Album sales started declining in 2000 and didn't stop. By 2009, the industry had shrunk by more than 40% compared to its late 90s peak. But the arguments for it were compelling too. Exposure mattered. A band that got popular on Napster or Kazaa could build a fan base they never would have reached through traditional channels. People discovered music they later bought concert tickets for, or merchandise. Some artists openly supported file sharing for exactly this reason. The lawsuits kept coming. In September 2003, the RIAA began filing lawsuits directly against individual users. Thousands of people, many of them college students, received threatening letters demanding settlements of thousands of dollars. The typical threat was $750 per song. Most people settled, some fought and lost. Universities added file sharing bans to their codes of conduct. IT departments implemented monitoring systems. Some schools throttled peer-to-peer traffic to nothing. Students adapted. They used VPNs. They shared files on local networks that never touched the public internet. The cat and mouse game never ended. By the mid-2000s, the landscape was shifting. BitTorrent was becoming dominant because it was faster and more efficient. iTunes launched in 2003, offering legal single-song downloads for 99 cents. That was the first real alternative that felt competitive. Spotify arrived in 2008 in Europe, 2011 in the United States. Suddenly, you could stream anything legally for $10 a month. File sharing didn't die all at once. It faded. The need for it faded. When you can stream 40 million songs instantly legally for less than the cost of one CD, why bother with the risk and hassle of torrents? But for those of us who were there, who spent hours carefully curating our libraries, who learned to spot fake files and avoid viruses, who stayed up until 3 in the morning waiting for a download to finish, that era meant something. It was a brief moment when the internet felt genuinely anarchic, when the rules hadn't been written yet, when massive corporations were losing control and didn't know how to get it back, when a 19-year-old in a dorm room could create something that brought the entire music industry to its knees. Napster lasted 2 years. Kazaa lasted 4. LimeWire made it to 10. eDonkey hung on a little longer through Emule. None of them were designed to last. They were built in a gap between the old world and the new one, a gap that lasted just long enough for millions of people to experience what the internet could be when no one was fully in control. The platforms are gone now. The lawsuits are over. The music industry adapted, survived, and rebuilt itself around streaming. But the impact of that era didn't disappear. It taught an entire generation that information wants to be free, that artificial scarcity doesn't work in a digital world, that you can't put the genie back in the bottle. Every streaming service today exists because of what file sharing proved was possible. Every on-demand library, every recommendation algorithm, every playlist feature, they're all echoes of what Napster promised. and what Kazaa, LimeWire, and eDonkey delivered, however imperfectly. The Wild West didn't last, it never does, but for a few brief years at the turn of the millennium, the internet belonged to the people who used it, and we used it to share everything. Thank you for watching this story. If you enjoyed learning something new today, make sure to subscribe, like the video, and leave a comment telling us what you thought of this story.